I fumbling? Wow, this is a mouthful. Hi, hello, namaste. Welcome to another episode of Kitaabi Keeda, a series where I read indie books in hopes of finding my next favorite author. Here's the TBR jar of fantasy, because neither you nor I have the emotional maturity to deal with real life. Let's dig in, shall we? And the next book I will be reading is A Magick Tale by David Vincent. When Prime Hunters Iranan and Renya take on a mundane missing persons case involving the son of Sentinel's Watch's mayor, the pair of lifelong friends soon discover it's anything but. Now dealing with an ethereal curse, witch and familiar must take on the hunt of their lives. Without support from the coven, they begin to question everything that they have been taught about the world. As Iranan is faced with the ultimate choice, will he overcome the fears of his past and become the man Renya always knew him to be? After witnessing firsthand that not all creatures are monsters, will Renya be able to see beyond her teachings and shed the precious beliefs that she holds as unshakable truths? With new discoveries laid bare, can the hunters find the strength within themselves and each other to survive the storm that is forming on the horizon? For anyone who has ever been told that you aren't good enough, you are enough. An audible groan tumbles from Rainia's throat. She lifts her foot, patting futilely at the grit that clings to her toes while holding open the weathered door for her partner. A witch and his familiar walk into a bar. Humans are species, so they leave. That's not a joke, that's the opening scene of this book. The story largely follows two plot beats, a romance and a mystery. Let's get into the mystery first. The story begins when Iranan and Renya are kicked out of a human tavern. The two hunters move to a more inclusive tavern, which incidentally happens to be the last place where our victim was spotted alive. A long conversation with the tavern keeper yields nothing of value, so they go meet the mayor, who, while he doesn't have information, does offer them his penthouse suite to stay for the duration of their visit. That's pretty swell of him. After a good night's rest in the luxurious penthouse, our two hunters show up bright and early at the police station and start digging through the case file. They soon realize that the disappearance of the mayor's son is connected to a couple of other disappearances in the city. Perusing through the missing persons file, they realize that a magical creature must be involved. Over the next few days, they examine different points of the city and realize that not one but two magical creatures are involved in these disappearances, and one of them happens to be a vampire. Now, in this world, two hunters are not enough to deal with a vampire. So, Eranan defers the case to the Coven of Witches, who dismiss his concern because of lack of proof. In an attempt to get some proof, they start talking to the families of the missing people. While they do come in possession of some useful information, it is not enough to be considered as proof. As a final resort, they decide to hunt down both the creatures. So they go to the only apothecary in the town and place an order for anything and everything that they would require. Though I have to say, the witch of the apothecary and her familiar are giving me some very strange vibes. Should I? I'm going to come out and say it. This is a red herring. It's almost obvious. Everything said and done, there is nothing to do except wait for the full moon. The night before, Ernan goes for a walk through the city. Brilliant idea that. Walking around a city where people are going missing left, right and center. He comes across a human under the vampire's control who basically tells him to go away. Through the human, the vampire basically tells Eranan that he is hunting for witch blood. I'm gonna be honest, if I was Eranan, I would be out of the city before the human made it home. Then again, that story probably wouldn't be worth reading. And so our hunters stay. It is the day of the full moon. It is the day of the fight. Which I will tell you is a lot of fun to read. Of course the hunters win. That much is obvious. What I think is the strength of the narrative is that victory comes at a cost. Not a huge cost, but at least it's something. Now when I say that the cost of the fight was not too much, I am talking not about the literal cost, which I do think was quite high, but about the impact that fight had on the rest of the narrative. I genuinely do not think that it is too much. Another thing I really love about the narrative is its depiction of afterlife. Is it afterlife or limbo? I don't know. Whatever it is well done. This is where the writer chooses to reveal the vampire, and I am sad to say that my predictions did not come true. No, the apothecary is not the vampire, but neither is it anyone we have met so far. They spend a considerable amount of time cooped up in a cave. Half the time, Eranan is still recovering. And let's just say there's a lot of misinformation and propaganda our leads mistook as facts. We're making friends with a vampire now? This is the second book I have read this year that has painted vampires in sympathetic light. So far removed from what Bram Stoker created. With the vampire's healing skills, Eranan is back on his feet in a few days. A quick pivot towards the coven of witches who have found out that Eranan was bitten by a magical creature. Which only happened 4 days ago, narratively speaking. News travels fast through the network, I guess. So they dispatch a couple of inquisitors to get our leads back. Which I feel is slightly pointless because our leads would have come back to the coven after finishing their mission. Talking about the romance storyline, it largely revolves around Eranan being unable to forgive himself for hurting Renya. Through appropriately peppered in dream sequences, we learn that Eranan and Renya have known each other for more than 15 years. Almost since she was an itty bitty kitty. I'm starting to get concerned about the ages here. Getting back, at one point in the story, they separate to clear their heads, but they just end up thinking of each other the whole time. Which I think is really cute. Remember how I talked about a great loss that's not actually a great loss? Yeah, in that, Eranan is given a choice between eternal peace with his deceased mother and returning to Renya. And he chooses to return because he just loves Renya that much. And just like that, all his fears are cured. All it took was dying. Almost dying. Actually, all it took was dying. There's slow burn and then there's sous vide. And this book is sous vide because the first kiss happens at the 87% mark. Yeah. Number 1. The mystery is tightly spun and unravels in a very satisfying way. Number 2. The main characters are highly skilled without coming across as overpowered, and their skill set seems to balance each other very well. I do, however, find myself wishing that the magic was more liberally used, since it does not seem to have a cost. Number 3. The lore is evenly distributed throughout the story, so at no point did I find myself overwhelmed or bored. Number 1. The biggest gripe I have with the story is that I wish the romance was less teasing and flirting and more of a silent support. Constant teasing and flirting when the protagonists seem to be in over their heads takes away from the seriousness of the problem. Number 2. I wish Olivia had a strong reason to support the coven, or at least our protagonists. Number 3. This is all bottom of the barrel stuff and I don't consider it a negative per se, but I did see the werewolf twist coming from a mile away. I would totally, absolutely, wholeheartedly encourage you to read this book. So that was A Magick Tale by David Vincent. For more book reviews, make sure you subscribe. Talk soon!